Cool. Thank you so much for meeting with us. This is an informational interview with Lawrence Livermore Labs. Our intent for today is to get to know you guys a little bit better, to know the mission that your agency has at this time, and any employment opportunities that you have. I would like to begin with our first question. What do you do, and what is the best thing about your job?
Okay, we thought that all three of us would answer this question because we all have very different perspectives. So I'll pass this one over to Katie first, and then go to Barry, and then myself.
Yeah, so what I do at Livermore Labs is I'm the administrative support for the military and veterans program. So I support under Sean and I support under Barry for so any support they need administratively in the ROTC program and also SkillBridge. So I will soon be taking the lead for the transitional military skills program. So I'm transitioning into that. So I'm constantly just still learning. But yeah, I'm here to support Barry and Sean and any logistics that needs to be as far as administratively. Barry, do you want to go?
Yep, I'll jump in. So my name's Barry Goldman. Specifically, what I do is, as Katie just mentioned, I bring in military students, Academy, ROTC, to the laboratory for summer internship appointments. That's been growing to include your newly commissioned officers, second lieutenants, ensigns, while they're waiting to start their service appointments. At the same time, if I can speak more globally from a lab standpoint, in my case, I was not in the service previously, and this is my opportunity to give back to the service in the country, which I think is important. I think for those of you that have served, it's an opportunity to move into a civilian role, but still supporting the military. I think that's important. In terms of what one gains out of the job, I think what's unique at the lab, unlike industry where you're supporting a specific research or project or product that they sell, we're supporting research that, again, supports defense and national security. And we work in this matrix relationship where there's a team and there's multiple people that bring different perspectives, majors, disciplines into that team. So you're broadening your knowledge and skills that help you as you support different research throughout the laboratory. So you're not doing the same thing every day, every week, every month, every year. So with that, Sean, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, Barry, thank you. So again, my name is Sean Stevenson. I'm a program manager here at the laboratory. And what I do in my job is I work day in and day out with a lot of candidates that are looking for employment. So work in that talent acquisition space, from students to active duty to reservists to veterans. I spend the majority of my time working with veterans and managing a program that is very exciting right now. We've got a lot of demand. We put ourselves out there as a national laboratory in the military and veteran space, and it's quite there's just a huge supply of men and women like yourself who are listening to this call that are looking for employment after they leave active duty. And so it's a lot of networking, coaching, mentoring, and really from a human perspective, working with any type of candidates that are interested that have a military background and working for the laboratory. I think the second part of the question, what is the best thing about my job? I think for me, it's really the people, the opportunity to work with veterans, for example, like yourself, the opportunity to serve in different capacities and really help a veteran, help a military student, help somebody who's making a transition understand how their skill set brings value here to the laboratory, and then taking that and really finding that position and really helping them see long-term opportunity in regards to a career rather than a job, or matching up like Barry and I do, whether it's a SkillBridge applicant or a student with a sponsor. So for me, it's working with the people, working the people that are serving the military and the people that are here. We have a hardworking workforce of about 8,500 that care deeply about this nation, and we're very patriotic. So it's really my what I like best is working with people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next question, please.
Okay, it
Okay.
looks like the second question is, what is it like to work for the laboratory and the people and the
Yes.
challenges that it offers?
Yes, that is our next question. Specifically, the culture and the people, which I mean, you did just touch on a little bit, and the challenges that it offers as a veteran. Maybe if you could give us a little bit of the perspective that you have.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think I stepped on you a little bit. I apologize there. I'm gonna hand it. All three of us are gonna answer question number 2 as well. So I will pass it over to Katie. Thank you.
Yeah, so far working at the lab, it's great. Like I have to concur with Sean about working with the people. Everybody is so far just super nice. It's such a learning culture that you're meeting people that are not just within your organization, but outside your organization, and everybody is just they love working at the lab. They can you can just tell that because it's just a diverse and exclusive workforce that people have been here for years, and I see that I hear a lot about how they have their kids working here, like 3 people in their families. It's just I've seen it on 2 different families that you have your brother, your mom working here, and it just goes to show how much this lab means a lot to them, and how they love it here and the people, and I think it's just a learning too. So I'm constantly learning new things within, the research and what's going on within the lab. So it's been a really good culture to work with. The people that I work with, I couldn't be more happier. So yeah, it's great.
So I mentioned earlier, I've been at the lab for over 35 years. Um, Clearly, if I didn't enjoy the lab and the culture, I don't think I would have been here this long. And in fact, we don't have any forced retirement, as Sean will probably share. We're at a point in time where there's a lot of folks like myself that are at or near retirement. So we have a lot of openings. We're seeing a bit of turnover. But as Katie just pointed out too, there are a lot of folks like myself that continue to work because we enjoy what we do and the fact that, again, we can support the nation. Um, I know that the lab is a participant in this glass door. I don't recall what our position is, but it's pretty high in terms of its ranking of evaluations from our employees. It's a great place from the standpoint of your work-life balance. So I think that, and again, just the nature of the lab that we're supporting defense and national security, and we don't have the time to go into examples of things that we've contributed to the nation. A number of those things that carry over into the public sector, to be able to contribute to that mission, I think speaks for itself. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think for me, it is what it's like to work at the lab is it's exciting. It's very busy. We are a very hard working workforce, but we also play hard as well. So it is work hard, play hard mentality. We have a great environment, as Katie talked about, and it's always interesting to hear from a new employee like Katie to hear from us before we hired her how we explain the work environment, and then to hear after a month what Katie's experience has been. And it is really revolves around our mission space, which is stockpile stewardship from a nuclear weapon standpoint. But we have so many other areas that we put so much emphasis in, whether it's climate, whether it's energy, There's just so many areas that we just don't have time to talk about, but it's an exciting place to work. If you're patriotic from in any capacity, like Barry, Katie, and myself are, it's really an extension of the military, is the way I often explain it. And so for Katie and myself, it's a very easy transition. And so that's one of the things we talk about for veterans quite often, is really helping them through that transition and looking at the complex. And when I refer to the complex, there's 17 national labs across the Department of Energy complex. We being one of those. In many ways, all of us are an extension of the military, especially your national defense and security laboratories. So that's a little bit about. Also, I would share from a testimonial standpoint, as Barry spoke to, Glassdoor is a great resource for basically anonymously seeing, as veterans, what are people within the walls, within the campus, saying about Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. And I'll go a little bit farther what Barry shared. Kim Boudel who is our CEO here at the laboratory. Her approval rating is at 95%, and so that tells you a lot that the senior leader here at the laboratory is approved from a anonymous standpoint at 95%. With that said, I'll turn it back over. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So next question, how does one apply for jobs within the lab? And are there any jobs that you would like to specifically highlight?
So I'll start off on that one. If one goes to our homepage, www.lonl.gov, there's a link in the top ribbon that says join our team. And from there, there's a careers button. Sean is showing this now on the screen. There's a careers button where you can search jobs, and there's the ability to search by job categories in the left-hand column. You can sort through specific categories. As of this morning, I saw 427 open postings. So when you ask if I can highlight specific jobs, there's just way too many. You have positions in administration, in business operations, in the crafts, in, of course, the engineering and sciences, ES&H, environment, safety, and health. And the list goes on: finance, HR, IT, security, public affairs. It goes on. So what we encourage, and I think we'll go into this in more depth, is that you first surf through those opportunities that are posted to identify what interests you and what you feel you can support with your experience. But that's the key to starting the process, is to see what's open, what postings there are.
Great, thank you. We could shift a little bit, and can you talk about the hiring process? What kind of candidate expect as they're going through this process?
Sure, David. I'll take that question. So fortunately and unfortunately, the process is it does take time. This is a national laboratory, and so it can take, I would say, the hiring process could take as much as 6 to 8 weeks, and it's very lengthy based on numerous different factors. So it really starts with thinking about a career, right? Not just thinking about a job. So we often, especially with our veterans and the three of us, we often talk, for example, about the matrix environment. And so from a hiring perspective, just like a lot of us, like you, David, in the Army, I'm sure worked at many different places, we're probably stationed in different areas every 2 years, changing. We're very similar to that here at the laboratory. And so we coach our applicants to think about, as they're considering being hired here, think long term, think for a career if that's what they're looking for, and most of the veterans are. And so having that career mindset versus a job mindset, because being matrixed, we do partner and we cross collaborate, a lot of cross pollination across the laboratories. We solve real big problems. But it typically starts with the application, like Barry just showed. Going through there, when you look at it, when you look at that posting, first of all, checking the qualifications, Dave. So really understanding, am I qualified first for the position? Then really looking at deeper into that posting. Does it interest me? Do I have passion for that work? If I'm qualified and it's something I'm interested in doing, we would coach them. Again, if this is a veteran, the first place I would say is start with us, helping coach you through that process. Then they would apply for the position. If they're so once they apply, that training manager like myself could have as many as 50 applicants. We could have 10 applicants. So we've got a team that screens that and really narrows that down to a small candidate pool of candidates, typically down to anywhere from 2 to 4. After that, it's usually could potentially be a phone screening, or it could be a WebEx or an on-site interview, and that's done in what we call a panel interview. Then there's an offer given to the leading candidate. That offer is usually accepted or negotiated in some capacity. Then there's background checks. And again, that whole process that I just described takes typically about 6 to 8 weeks.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So it all begins from from application, and my next question is with the resume, is there a specific structure that Livermore Labs like to receive, or would you have any specific guidance in how a veteran should be writing their resume so that when they apply for the job, it's successful?
Sure, Leonie. I am. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is one of the resources on our military and veterans website to help veterans. And this is and what I did is I pulled this right off of there. And so this kind of breaks down the different components that we typically look for at the laboratory. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be every component that's in here. That's going to depend on what your credentials are, what kind of background you have, experience, education, many different factors. But typically this is kind of the way a resume is made up. And I will share, from a resume standpoint, we prefer one page front and back. Even some of us that are very senior, you may have a wealth of experience, but there's ways to truncate that experience to one page front and back. The other thing is a cover letter. A cover letter is very important here. And so a cover letter is typically that first document that a hiring manager is going to look at. So if she's hiring for that position and two veterans have a cover letter, that's typically going to play in your favor. So just some things to think about with a cover letter. And with a cover letter, really sharing very quickly why you're qualified for the position, and then also what makes you authentic, what makes you unique. And again, for veterans, I would start out with being a veteran. We've worked very hard to help the laboratory understand the benefit of a veteran, the value of a veteran, and the majority of our products are for the warfighter. So it's a great place to start, but that cover letter is very important. Here's the main components of the resume. So just identifying, some of the data around your name, location, address, summary statement, typically what you're looking for, a brief summary statement of the position, the things that you're looking for, that would typically correlate with the position you're actually applying for. Your educational background, degrees, certificates, experience, work history. Here's where we typically talk about the accomplishments, and you want to make sure you don't have gaps. For example, in your resume, and this is the world I think everybody on the panel here lives in, that we share with applicants, just make sure that you don't have to necessarily share an incredible amount of detail based on each position, but you just don't want to have gaps in your resume, because then that's going to create questions for us. We typically then go to talking about skills and competencies, any languages, if you're educated in linguist type roles or positions from the military, activities and interest, honors, any publications. So we do tend to see with a lot of our PhD candidates, different research and publications, travel and references. So hopefully that gives a good foundation for a resume.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, so with that, as far as the positions, are there any veteran hiring preferences that y'all have? Like, are there certain positions that maybe are targeted more towards veterans? And if there are, what are the preferences for hiring? Like, do they get extra points or anything like that regarding their application?
Hey, I think I lost you guys there. I apologize. So the question was hiring preferences, right?
Yeah, for
Okay.
veterans specifically.
Sorry about that.
Oh, not a,
Yep. In short, we've invested an incredible amount of time and effort in educating the lab on the value of a veteran. And so it really starts with going to the application website, but we are hiring for every position here at the lab. So a lot of veterans ask that question because they feel like, being a national lab, are we only focused on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math? And that is very far from the truth. And so we have hired E3s and E4s in administration or in logistics and in finance. We've hired in legal. We've hired in a lot of different areas that aren't STEM related. So there's not necessarily, I wouldn't say, a significant preference, although we do have our own program that really focuses on outreach and recruiting for military. But it's really helping the veteran understand that regardless of their background, there could potentially be a home for them. So we do push a lot of homework back on the veteran to really look at that application website and really look at their experience versus the actual postings. But to answer your question, we're really hiring, we're bringing in veterans in all different military occupational specialties.
wonderful. Thank you for that, especially for throwing in the positions, E1s, E3s, and allowing us to know that positions are available for experience within those realms.
Yeah, you're welcome. One of the things we do is we work with community colleges locally as well, and so we see a lot of our young enlisted women and men who are starting to work on their education. So we provide internships, for example, at Las Positas. We work with Las Positas here locally with a curriculum on the engineering side. So we'll take those young, often E3s, E4s, E5s that are coming in. They'll get their feet wet here at the laboratory. They'll work on their education in that curriculum based on in this case, in engineering, and have an opportunity as a technician to come here and work at the lab after they've gone through that program. So there's some different things we do for some of the more junior folks.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
Very good, thank you. So next question, how is the interview structured? And are there any specific examples of questions that our veterans can possibly sample and prepare for a possible interview?
Sure, Ryan. I'm gonna share my screen again with you guys because I think this will help some of the folks. So the interview process is a little bit structured here again because it's a national lab. And Ryan, to answer your question, it's typically done in a panel fashion. So we'll have anywhere from as little as 3 people, which is usually a hiring manager, a senior administrator, and maybe a customer who could potentially work with this person coming in. We could have a panel as large as 6 to 7 people, depending on the level of the position the person is coming in for. But we try not to make that too overwhelming for a candidate, naturally, right? When you're sitting there being questioned by seven or 8 folks. So we try to keep that within reason to where we truly get to see the candidate at their best and not be overwhelmed by a panel. We use what's called behavioral interviewing, and I think most of us on this panel probably know what that is. But for the candidates, if you don't, definitely do some research on behavioral interviewing, and I would just Google that if you haven't done a behavioral interview. And what it's based off of is past behavior dictates future performance is really the best way to describe it. And so as you're looking at a posting that you feel you're qualified for and interested in, you apply for this position and you get an interview, the type of questions that would happen is you'd be asked some questions based on competencies. And so as you look at that posting, for example, you may see something talking about teamwork. And so you could pretty much guarantee one of the panel members is going to ask a question about teamwork. So they may say, Ryan, tell us about a time when you worked with a team when you were in the Navy and you had a team member that didn't follow an order. How did you handle the situation? And so what we're looking for is, how did Ryan behave in the past, right? And we typically answer that in what's called a STAR model. And so a STAR is situation, task, action, and result. And so once you get comfortable answering questions in that format, it could be a little bit daunting initially. And typically what I coach my candidates to do, especially if you do a remote interview, is you can have your resume in front of you. Like I've got some information for me below me where you can't even see my eyes, that I could be looking down, right? And as a panel member is asking a question, you could pull back to your resume and something's going to spark that you see, and then you could speak to what that accomplishment was. So there's some just some things that help you better understand how we interview.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
The next question is around follow-up. So understanding that veterans can be very, I don't know, I guess the word is motivated for jobs, and also understanding that you get a number of resumes. The question always comes up: how do I follow up? Did they get my resume? Did they, what can I do to follow back up with the employer to see where they are, whether they need anything additional, or whether I'm going to be considered for the job?
So I'm going to answer that. There's a couple of ways to address that. First, if one is just applying to a posting, generally those are not going to identify the people that are involved, that are on the panel that will be interviewing the individual. So you may not have that information, but that, again, speaking for Livermore Lab, where you're interacting with Katie and with Sean, where they can help to facilitate those connections and interactions with the people that will be doing the interviewing. Where an interview is actually taking place, just as we're on this this virtual meeting right now, as people speak, you have their names up on the screen. Record those names, ask them for their email addresses, and basically it's a common courtesy afterwards to email those people and thank them for their time. Maybe add some specific thoughts in terms of you feel you can specifically support that project in some way because of some experience you've had. In addition, while you don't want to wear out a welcome, you know that other people are being considered, and of course you don't know who they are in that competition. So you want the people that have interviewed you to know, one, you're interested in that job, that opportunity, and you're still available. They don't know who else you're interviewing with and whether you might be accepting some other opportunity. So I think it's a common courtesy, but to follow up with those people, thanking them for the time, for the interview, and adding any additional thoughts that you might not have thought of during the conversation.
Great, thank you. I think the next question is going to be around background investigations. This is obviously, there can be roles. You've talked a little bit about the variety of roles, but some are going to be higher maybe clearances, and some maybe have lower clearances. Can you talk about what kind of background investigations are performed once a candidate is at that point?
Sure, I'll take this question, and I'd like to say too, I'd like Barry to give some feedback afterwards as well. Barry's been doing this a long time. I've been doing it for about 12 years, but I think Barry, the more I think about this question, can bring some additional insight. But for me, David, I would say it starts with what's really valuable for the veteran is having a clearance, first of all. So if they have a clearance, that's one of the things before we even get into investigations and backgrounds is for example, a lot of the folks either have a TSSCI, they may have a secret. Just having a clearance in the military is really it's one of the ways we're able to sell our program here at the laboratory because the feeder, the ability to bring somebody in very quickly in what we call a cold room, okay, preferably not put somebody in a cold room where they can't do the work that you hired them to do. That's a big step, something very different that we want our veterans on their resumes. We want our veterans as they're working and partnering with us to let us know what level their clearance is and if it's current. So from an investigation background, we always do investigations on any selected candidate. Okay, so whether it doesn't matter regardless of what level they are. So that investigation, it's to get real concrete. There's a urinalysis done here on site, or since the pandemic, it's sent to them, and that urinalysis is sent back to us. That's put through a laboratory here, and we do just a basic background investigation. Besides that, Barry, can you provide any more detail in regards to maybe to help David with the investigation?
Sure. Well, clearly, if one has a active DoD clearance, moving that over makes life a lot easier. Because we are under the Department of Energy, DOE, that's different from DoD, so they still want to process the DOE clearance. Sean, you mentioned the cold room. I've heard it referred to as the cooler. When you look at the postings, many postings will say whether a clearance is required immediately or whether it's one that has to be obtained for that individual, in which case a person might be able to still work in this cooler area until their clearance comes in. I would hope if you're a veteran, you've been military, it might be a quicker process for us to obtain that DOE clearance. That I don't know, but clearly having the clearance opens more doors. There's areas in the laboratory where clearance is not, at least we still have to have a DOE entry level clearance, but a clearance is not needed for the work that you do. There's other areas in the lab that are classified and you have to have that clearance to be in that area or be escorted by somebody that has the appropriate level of the clearance. So clearances open more doors at the laboratory. I hope that helps a little.
Just a follow up on that is say a veteran had been out of the military for a while and their clearance is not active. Is that going to help maybe streamline the process, or how might that work with getting a new clearance?
Well, for me, I'm prime example of the fact that my security clearance was inactive because I've been out for 5 years. So after I got my offer, and I accepted my offer, then I get sent the pre-employment. So they sent me the location based on the location where I'm at home. So where to get my drug test. So I did that. And then they sent me the pre-employment background check. So I filled that out. And that's just pretty much like, they just went over pretty much that what you put in your resume is accurate. So your previous employment, what you've been doing for the last, I believe it's 5 years. So they reached out to my sister. They reached out to your references. So they just want to make sure that, everything's accurate based off of what you put on your resume. Once that is approved, then you're able to work. If you don't have a security clearance, within the first couple of weeks, you get sent your security clearance, and then that's when you fill it out. So that's where I'm at in the process right now, is I sent my security clearance and now it takes a while. So just because you don't have one doesn't mean necessarily you're not going to get hired, because obviously I didn't have one. But it's just more of a process of, let's say if for my example, my office is in a location where you need a Q clearance. So I'm not able to go into that location unless I have an escort. So, I'm working from home until then. So it's just kind of like there, but there's other obviously positions where you don't need that a clearance to work in that building. So I guess it just depends on where you're getting hired with the on the at the lab.
Dave, the other thing I would add to that, with Kate, and it's perfect, Katie's going through this, is it's often not a showstopper, especially for veterans. We have become a lot more flexible. The pandemic kind of forced our hand, right? So now we've got some other vehicles that we didn't have before to potentially, for example, Katie works remotely some days, comes in some days, may have to go to a different building based on certain credentialing and requirements. But I think the message I want to share is we are flexible. Where we're not as flexible, and that is those areas where, for example, you may need a TSSCI, the equivalent of a queue for us to do work right away, right? And so there's areas where we're much more flexible than others, but we're definitely holistically in a much better place than we were before the pandemic.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to move into a little bit of a different area. So from the beginning stages, right, of coming on to the lab to work there. Once you're there for a little bit, what does career progression look like? How does it work?
Sure, I'll take that question. And so it really, I think, Amelia, where it starts is it's built off of success, it's built off your performance, and it's built off of credibility, just like anywhere else. So just like all of your candidates coming from the military, working hard and being finding some success, and once that performance is there and the credibility is there, I think it's based on the type of role that you're in, right? So some folks we may hire are individual contributors, some are supervisors, some are managers, some are senior directors. It really depends on the level that you come in at. And so, for example, if I was a individual contributor and I came in as an E4 as a technician, that progression path is really based on the things I just described, but also, for example, the desire to get more education. So we often look at, as we're promoting and we're looking at progression, is how ambitious is the person who we just hired, right? And so, for example, we provide an educational assistance program here. And so as long as the education is work related, whether that's a certificate or a degree, that's something that we consider that is appreciated and respected. So we talk a lot about being lifelong learners here. So whether you come in with an AA degree or you come in with a PhD, still, with that lifelong learner mentality to help with the progression. But the path, it really depends on, like, for example, if we bring in a leader, like we bring in an NCO that maybe starts out as a supervisor here, or we bring in a junior officer that starts out as a group leader, or we bring in a senior officer or senior enlisted that starts as a division leader. That progression path is really based on the next levels of leadership and also working laterally as well. So we really value, you heard me talk a little bit about the matrix, the opportunity to work laterally and not always be concerned about moving up, but it just taking the time to learn the laboratory, and organically it just happening over time.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds really good. Sounds like a lot of opportunities and a lot of opportunity for growth, certainly. So, with that, is there any additional advice that you would like to provide to our veterans when applying for positions within the lab?
Sure, Ryan. We thought we would give this to all three of us, so you guys can hear our different perspectives. So I'll pass it over to Katie.
Yeah, so my advice for veterans, so first for just going through the process is your resume. I got a chance to speak with Sean when they had the career fair back in the beginning of November, and he shared with me the military website on Livermore Labs website, and I went through the resume. I went through the interview questions. I really studied the interview questions because I have did such a like formal interview like with the panel, so I wanted to be prepared. And also so I really designed my resume based off of that. And then I also did a cover letter. So, and I did my cover letter to uh, my for my military background. I made it to where for that position and how my military background will impact that position and why I am beneficial for that position. So I think doing a good resume, getting your cover letter, and also maybe even getting a LinkedIn account, because they do ask that if you have one during your application. So those three things I think will be great for veterans to um, do to it be, I guess, a standout for the lab. During the application process, they do ask if you are a preferred veteran. So they do that. They do ask that. So just so you know.
So I'll jump in there with some of the topics that we've covered. Clearly, checking out our postings, seeing what you feel interests you that you're qualified to support. And then, as Sean was showing up on the screen a moment ago, the veterans.lnl.gov website gives a lot of links that will help you, as was shown, in preparing your resume and getting to understand some of our terminology and language. Those are excellent resources as you're applying to postings. I think in addition, of course, making the connection, especially to Katie and to Sean, so they can help with advice, with counseling, and possibly with connections to the researchers that will be the hiring managers in trying to help you and them be more aware of your application. So I think that's the best you can do to help us help you.
Thank you, Barry. This is Sean. I think what I'll add is for a veteran, be confident. When we see that when Barry and I and Katie go out and we work with different transition commands and we work with different military students and veterans, is be confident in your capabilities, your experience, your education. This isn't, we are a national laboratory, but sometimes some of the younger veterans almost feel overwhelmed. And to Barry's point, that's where we counsel, that's where we coach and teach and really help support them and help them understand where their strengths could potentially benefit the laboratory. I would also say leverage our program, like Barry said. I mean, that it's rare, and you guys know this, we all work in the same profession. It's very rare that an organization like this has as much skin in the game as we do. And so we care deeply about the veterans. We are all service providers, and that's what we're here for, is to help you guys and to help you gals to really find employment here. I would say specifically, don't just cast a wide net with your resume. We see that way too often. So I would really tweak that resume based on the position. So it's going to take a little more effort. It's going to take a little more time. That cover letter, again, is very important. So if you apply for 3 positions, you should have 3 cover letters. It's just the nature of what it's going to require. But that extra half hour you put in could really set you apart from other candidates. I would really share, again, in that cover letter, to be specific, what makes you authentic. And what I mean by that is, again, even listing that you're a veteran and you've served our nation and how you've served and sacrificed, that's already making you authentic. 70, we have about almost 7% of our population here are veterans. So 93% are not veterans, right? So that does make you authentic. That does make you different. One of the things I would do is know our language. And so the website I was briefly sharing, and I put it in the chat that Barry just spoke about, we have a really simple crosswalk in there that really helps you take the language that you're used to, the acronyms in the military, and really translating that into our language. So that's not only beneficial when you interview, how you speak, but also how you write. do some research on our websites, really critical to be educated on who we are and what we do. And then finally, like I said, really look into behavioral interviewing and just be prepared for that.
Thank you so much. And thank you for reinforcing that, because that is something that we do encourage a lot of our veterans to do is tailoring their resume specifically to a job announcement. And also, also reinforcing the fact that they should also be doing the research of the organization as well. But that pretty much concludes our informational interview. Before I end the record, I noticed that Katie, I think you were trying to say something, but I think you were muted at the time. Did you want to take this opportunity and say what you needed to speak about?
Oh no, I think I can't remember the question. I think he was going over the interview, but I was also gonna say for in the in the applying process is it's your resume and it's also your cover letter too. So those are the two documents you have to submit in order to apply. So but we went over that the advice for the cover letter. So yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Sorry, I'm getting like disconnected a lot. Sorry.
No problem. And thank you again so much, everybody. I'm gonna go ahead and terminate the recording right now.